for anyone that's been following along, this is the Jarrah bench top, parquetry bench top that I've been making for Max from Swan Valley Machine Shop. I'm just about finished fine sanding it and ready to start applying the oil. I'll have to do a couple of coats of oil because this is very dry timber and it'll soak up the oil over a day or two. But you sort of get an idea. It's about 2.8 metres long roughly and 650 millimetres wide. So we'll have a go at putting some oil on and start to bring the colours out. It'll go very dark. The particular oil that I'm going to use is a locally Australian produced one. It's made by Gillie Stephensons. It's called Australian Orange Oil, and it is made from oil from the skins of oranges. They press the orange skins and collect the oil out of it. They add a couple other things, some thinners and so on to make it thin, but that's what I'm about to do. I'll give you guys a bit of a follow along as I pop the oil on, because often that's when the colours pop the best. You know, a few years time this will oxidise, the timber will oxidise under the coating and it'll look a lot darker than it will initially while I'm just starting out. So I've already sealed the underside, so now it's just a question of I'll probably start right up this end, and I like to put this stuff on neat like this and then just spread it with a wet or an oil soaked rag, and you can see that as you do it starts to pop the colours and give you the patterns of the parquetry herringbone pattern that was laid out. But again, as I said, this is a really hungry dry timber and it'll soak all of this oil up on this initial coat pretty quickly, and I'm pretty sure it'll do the same on at least the second coat. Maybe by the third one we might start to get some actual saturation. I won't bore you with all of them, but sometimes it's nice just to see timber colour come out when you've spent hours and days and weeks working on a project. It's always nice to see the timber colours start to pop. So it's about 38mm thick all up, almost 40. So what would you call that, an inch and a half, inch and 3/4 or something? They're all solid Jarrah blocks. These blocks are out of a house roof, a demolition house roof. So this is all recycled hardwood. It's probably spent at least 100 years inside someone's roof. So it should be well and truly dry enough. I don't have a kiln these days, I used to. But I think being as dry as it is, it'll be quite serviceable. And this is for a bench top in Max's engineering, mechanical fitting workshop. So I'm sure it's going to get a pretty hard life with, you know, parts being brought in and popped on the top saying, hey, can you make me one of these, or can you fix this, or whatever. That's generally how these things work. But this is a really hard timber Jarrah. It's called Eucalyptus marginata, and it's a locally grown West Australian hardwood. I think it's about 8.5 on the Janka scale, so it's a tad harder than walnut. It used to be called, in the very early days of settlement back in the 1800s, it was called Swan River mahogany because it has quite a dark mahogany type look to it. It's not a bad timber to work. It takes a reasonable polish. It sands okay. And it stands up to hardware. I'm doing a natural oil finish on it because I'm assuming that seeing as it's solid, it's not a veneer, it'll get a fairly hard life in that environment, and if Max is ever of a a mind to do so, he can always sand it down and re-oil it if it gets damaged or the top gets dented or something. You know, there's nothing to stop him at some future point sanding this all back down and resealing it. That's the beauty of a natural oil finish. It's not totally destroyed if something happens to it. You know, you can always resurrect it. There's plenty of thickness of timber there for him to be able to sand down and, you know, hopefully keep it going for him for a number of years. Or might see out his lifetime. Hopefully it'll see out mine. Because I can tell you now, I'm not really fussed about doing another one, to be honest. It's been a lot more work than you might think. This particular one was made on my Robland X31, which is over there in the background. And it's far from perfect, but it's as good as I can do with what tools and equipment I have at my behest at the moment. A nice big drum sander would have been nice, because I have spent days and hours and literally probably more than a week sanding these tops down with hand tools, you know, the Makita 4-inch sander and then handheld random orbit sanders, because that's what I got. You've got to make use of what you've got. But I'm hopeful this will do the trick for him. And I'm reasonably pleased with how it's come up. It's not perfect, far from perfect, because it is recycled timber. It's second-hand timber. It was full of nails. You can see the stack of timber over there that I've dressed that this came out of. And all of it had nail holes in it, as you can imagine, because it was up in the rafters and joists and ceiling joists and so on. And all of those things were nailed into place. So I've de-nailed all of this timber before I put it through the machine by hand. And I've tried really hard to place all the blocks in these patterns so that the majority of any defects are actually hidden underneath or inside. And tried to work with surfaces that you know, present basically as new timber would, hopefully. You can see this all soaking in pretty well as I'm applying this. I'm going to have to let it soak in overnight. I'll come up in the morning and give it another full coat. But yeah, I'm reasonably pleased with that. That's not coming up too bad. Once I've got the oil in and let it dry, and I'm totally happy that it is well sealed, I will actually wax this. I've got a wax product from the same manufacturer here in Australia, Gillie Stephensons, and it's basically like your old Johnson's floor wax. So when this is all soaked in and gone a tiny bit dull, I will break out the floor wax and wax it and buff it, and with any luck it'll come up to a bit of a, it'll just be like a medium luster. It certainly won't be a gloss, but for a working top there's probably no point trying to make it glossy. We've used all of that one, I think. Yep, a little bit more. As I said, the more this soaks in, the deeper it soaks in, the more it seals the timber against moisture ingress over the years. Hopefully keep it sealed from any oil or whatever fluids that Max might encounter in his workshop. I think this is more of his office desk, I guess. But yeah, I think it'll work. There you go. Let me know what you think in the comments.